Okay, welcome everyone. Wherever you are and which part of the world you are, we are very excited to have you here with us in the webinar on positive masculinity and gender-based violence prevention. We're looking at the global context and in particular findings from Armenia. My name is Goof Buys and I am the manager of the UNESCO Chair on Global Health and Education. So welcome to all of you here. And today we will look at the persistence of harmful gender stereotypes and toxic masculinity as a significant global concern, contributing to various forms of gender-based violence and reinforcing unequal gender dynamics everywhere in the world. And you do not have to just open the news and see what we are talking about. It's very, very topical. And today we are going to talk about 3 points. One, the importance of challenging toxic ideas about masculinity that lead to violence and discrimination, and the need to engage men and boys in efforts to promote gender equality. The second is we're going to look at a project recently implemented in Armenia to promote positive masculinity. And finally, we look at what works to foster positive gender roles, encourage nonviolent behavior, and reduce harmful stereotypes worldwide. And we have today the following speakers: Professor Maria Jourdan, who's chairholder of the UNESCO Chair on Masculinities and Gender Equality in Belfast. We have Professor Didier Jourdan, who is chairholder of the UNESCO Chair on Global Health and Education. We have with us Elena Kirushina from the UNAIDS Regional Support Team for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Katerina Samilogo, who's from the UNESCO Institute for Information Technologies and Education. And finally, Mr. Armi Mkristian, who is project coordinator and gender officer at UNESCO's Institute for the Teens Live Armenia project. So I would like to invite the speakers to briefly introduce yourselves. DJ, you want to go? 30 seconds.
Yes. So I'm Didier Jourdan, I'm the chairholder of the UNESCO Chair in Global Health and Education. And this webinar is extremely important for us because this question of the social norms is at the very core of what we are trying to promote, especially in schools. Over to you, Rolf.
Thank you. Professor Jourdan, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Jourdan. I'm professor at Queen's University Belfast and UNESCO Chair on Masculinities and Gender Equality. And I'm looking forward to a really good conversation on this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Elena.
Thank you very much. My name is Lena Kirushina. I'm Gender Equality and Youth Officer at the Regional UNAIDS Office for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. I'm particularly proud that this project is being presented today. The idea was born about a year ago when we at UNAIDS saw the data from ICPD. I think it's called Report on the Level of Tolerance Towards Violence among young men, young people overall, and we were quite surprised with the numbers, including in European countries. But unfortunately, in our region, the data was even worse. So yeah, I'm really proud that and happy to contribute to this discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Katerina.
Yes, thank you, Rolf. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ekaterina Samoliga from UNESCO ITs. And I work on all the digital project concerning youth, also artificial intelligence in education. And I'm really proud to attend this session today. And thanks to the amazing initiative from UNAIDS, we have implemented this very important project on positive masculinities. And today we're going to oversee the results of it. And we're going to also present some other projects from across the globe. They have serious impact on transforming mentalities, let's say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And finally, Armi.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Armi Magurchan from Teams Live Armenia. I am the project coordinator as well as the gender officer at Teams Live, and I'm very excited to be here to be able to share with you the project and the key findings. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining.
Great. Okay, thank you. And thank you all for introducing yourselves. And as you can hear, a great lineup of speakers and a very dense and hopefully exciting webinar with good learning points for each of you. We hope to keep you in the Zoom meeting for the next 90 minutes or so. And so first I would like, so if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen. And after each talk, we would like to hear, look at these and share your feedback with the speakers. We try to have this webinar as interactive as possible, so please do not hesitate to share your insights and questions. And there will be time, so after each presentation, to look at these. So first, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Maria Lohan. And please, Professor Lohan, can you tell us a few words about the UNESCO chair that you're leading and explain why it is important to challenge toxic ideas about masculinity that lead to violence and discrimination, and why we need to engage men and boys in efforts to promote gender equality. The floor is yours.
Oh, yes, happy to, and thank you very much. Well, in essence, the aim of my UNESCO chair is about exploring the best ways to engage men and boys on gender equality for women and girls, but also about improving men's and boys' lives alongside. So I think what we have become aware of even in the last couple of weeks is the importance not to alienate men, but to bring them into the conversation and to think about what are the best ways of doing that, of creating allies. And my UNESCO chair is particularly focused on the area that we're talking about today, which is sexual and reproductive health and rights, and also more specifically around gender-based violence. So I'd like to posit to you, first of all, why I think the general argument of the need to include men and boys in these kinds of debates are important. And let me sort of describe it to you, if you like, in terms of a relatively simple equation that I guess is not so simple, but let me put it this way. Over on the left-hand side, you can see that empowering women and girls in sexual and reproductive health and rights is extremely important, and it's the place we start. And it's the place we have started for a very, very good reason, because most of the deficits in areas of sexual and reproductive health and rights, whether it's gender-based violence, unintended pregnancy, deficits in access to family planning, they all impact women's and girls' lives very hugely. And these are where the main deficits lie. But we also understand that years and years of investment in this area with women and girls has been extremely important in changing this. But the more we have done research and interventions in that area, and the more we talk to women and girls, we also understand that men and boys in their lives, as well as men and boys in society, are key enablers and inhibitors of sexual and reproductive health and rights for girls and women. So it also becomes extremely important to think of the ways we need to intervene with men and boys to also shift this dial for women and girls, as well as improve sexual and reproductive health and rights for boys also, men and boys, where there are also inequalities among men and boys. So this is extremely important for shifting the bigger sustainable development goals in terms of improving health and well-being, gender equality, and quality education. But it's not a simple equation, as I said as well, because it becomes quite hard when there's so much to do over here with women and girls, when we recognize that, to shift focus onto men and boys. Because that means shifting resources as well. So it begs the question, not just if we should engage with men and boys, but also how we should do this. How we should do this so that we don't disinvest from women and girls when we invest in men and boys. And you'll find in the policy literature, whether you'll find it in work with WHO, you'll find it in work with UNESCO, they often refer to this policy approach called a gender transformative approach. Perhaps not the best name in the world, but a gender transformative approach, I think, is a very important policy way or way of thinking about bringing men and boys into the table here. Because it's about engaging with men and boys on issues such as sexual and reproductive health and rights or quality education or any areas of health, but with keeping gender equity in the frame for women and girls at the same time, so that we don't lose sight of women and girls as we invest with men and boys. So it's about engaging with men and boys as allies and, where necessary, challenging harmful masculinities or what was put up there as toxic masculinities in order to improve gender relations for all. So I think as well, comprehensive sexuality education is a fantastic place to start in terms of investing in these kind of issues with men and boys early in adolescence to last a lifetime. So that's why the most important area we're going to learn about today is the work that's been going on in Armenia. And I look forward to hearing all about this and sharing that as an example. And then afterwards, I'll come back and share a few examples from other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for your very comprehensive and short introduction to set the scene. Our next speaker, which is my dear colleague Didier Jourdan, you will tell us a few words about how promoting gender equality and combating gender-based violence can contribute to health and education in general. Please go ahead, DJ.
Thank you very much, Rolf, and I'm really happy to give you ideas during this webinar, knowing that what's very important is to leave the floor to our colleagues from Armenia, because the key question is, on the one hand, of course, where do we want to go? But the question too is, so what? And we really need to have that kind of examples that help us to understand, how to move forward in terms of a positive masculinity and the work with the boys and the young men. I just would like to share with you 5 simple ideas, and again, to introduce the talk of our colleagues from Armenia. The one is about this question of the social norms and how we could contribute to influence them. The second is the kind of roadmap we could have about a positive masculinity. The third is about the participation of young boys and I would say young people in general, as Maria talked about. And then I'm going to put the focus on schools, just because what we're going to talk about with our colleagues from Armenia with the Teens Lives project is about what we call informal education. And it's also important to make the link and to articulate non-formal, informal, and informal education. And finally, to move to a call of action, because clearly it's timely. And these questions of linked to masculinity are at the very core of many social challenges. So the first thing is that harmful norms simply kills every day. And our role is to see what we could do. And probably the key word for that is our capacity to influence social change. Very often we are thinking from a kind of a magic wand perspective, having the idea that we could convince people. In reality, all that things are directly connected to very deep cultural, but also mediatic and economic determinants. And probably they most important thing is to, first of all, to focus on what are the determinants of this kind of norms, the toxic masculinity and the violence that is linked to it, and to see how we could contribute to influence these norms through education. And clearly, it's mostly a question of citizenship. Why? Because what we are talking about is clearly linked to the living together within our societies with people from different gender, different races, different ages, different communities, different cultures. And clearly, what we have to do through this process of education to positive masculinity is to think it and shape it as part of the kind of compulsory citizenship education for every children and young people, but also, of course, adults in our societies, in order to contribute to challenge the stereotypes that are at the very core of the issue we are facing with gender-based violence. ID number one. The idea number two comes directly from what I said. If we want to influence positively the social norms, we need to know where they come from. And in the education of young men, boys and young men, it comes also, of course, from families, peers, friends, communities, school system, the mass media, the media on demand, the social media, the cultural system, but also the primary care system. And that's why WHO works on its side on the way in which it's possible to fight against gender-based violence within primary healthcare. Having that in mind, it means that to move forward, we need to think through the triple process of formal education, the schools, non-formal education, which is associations, sports clubs, faith communities, scouts, and whatever you want, and the informal educational process. Remember how important was WhatsApp and the different tools developed, for example, by the IITE during the COVID times. So contributing to influencing the social norms through education means that we need to harness the power of formal, non-formal, and informal education. But of course, it's only one part of the process. And even if our webinar is focused on education, we also need to remind us that it's part, it's one of the pieces of the puzzle, together with the support for the victims, with the measures that ensure the accountability for perpetrators. And this focus on education has to be think as one of the different ways and means we have to move forward in that field. Concerning what to do and what we are talking about, if I mention citizenship from the start, this is just because the compass, the direction, is the one of the culture of the human rights that help us to build another kind of relationship with other people, and especially the one who are different, and to be able to take us distance with the social pressure, the media pressure, the peer pressure in terms of norms and stereotypes. This vision of education, as I said, is not limited to school, even if we're going to talk about school in a minute, but it's also at the level of the community. And this question of the stereotypes has to be taken into account in all the different dimensions of the social life of young people. I also would like to mention that within this framework, you also need to make space for the victim blaming process that is one of the key issues. Violence is one thing, but this violence is very often hidden just because of the victim blaming. The third idea is about the participation, and Maria already talked about that. Within the UNESCO chair, we have a big project about the participation of young people in health promotion interventions. And it appears that it's still extremely difficult just because the power sharing, the fact that we are genuinely giving power to young people, children, and young boys in that case is still extremely limited. And probably we need to think that probably in that case, if we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, is probably first of all to listen to the young boys and the young men about the social pressure they have on their shoulders and the way in which together with them we could contribute to reshape this norm and change these terrible toxic stereotypes about masculinity. And then the fourth idea is about the role of schools. But you know, one of the big risks we have at this stage is to give schools the key role in every domain. It is about climate action, it is about environment, it is about violence, it is about multiculturality. All that things are extremely important. But at the end of the day, the key issue becomes for the teachers, the principals, the headmasters, to find a way to put all that things together in order to create an educational dynamic for all kids. And what research shows in our field is that working on the stereotypes and promoting positive masculinity in schools goes through 3 key dimensions. The first one is about what is taught in class. This is a curriculum. This is the tools that are used. And you all know that working on stereotypes, it's not giving lessons to learn. It's working also using the creativity, the emotion of the young people, using the incredible resources we have from children's book, from arts and different productions that will help to touch the people and to move forward with them. The second is, of course, about the school management, the social and the health services that have to be accessible, and also the link with the community, because there is no walls around the schools. They are directly connected to the social dynamics around them. So in practice, working in schools and promoting positive masculinity goes through the educational dimension, teaching what happens in the classroom, the school management, and the relationship with the community and the partnership, mostly with associations and different NGOs around. As I said from the start, schools are not magic wand. And then this 3 dimensions has to lead the schools to build plans, but that cannot be, one among others. You cannot have many different layers, different bricks. You need to put all that bricks linked to citizenship and including, of course, the prevention of gender-based violence and the promotion of positive masculinity. These bricks, like the Lego bricks, have to be organized to create coherence. And you could find different ways of doing that, but in any case, you always need training, support, resources, and social and technological innovation to support the people. There's many ways of doing that. You can base your school project on equality. You can base your school project on living together. You can base your school project on health promotion through what we are doing with another UNESCO institute. This is the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, in order to build health learning pathways all over the curriculum of the children and young people from preschool to high school, and working on the development of competencies, skills, and also knowledge about different themes. This has to be part of the policy of the school systems, knowing that at this time, only 32 countries on the planet have comprehensive plans linked to fighting against gender-based violence in the school system. So to conclude, clearly, we need to move forward now. It's really timely because you know that all over the planet, you have more and more social actors that are promoting different visions of masculinity than the one we are trying to promote here. And then we need to move forward also in thinking from the perspective of the boys, what role models, but also what kind of future are we offering to boys? And as Maria said, it's the education of the boys and the girls about gender equality and gender-based violence. This is just the two sides of the same coin. Now, what we need to do is probably to contribute to support the states and the different actors. It's also to support the different partnership and, of course, to contribute to promote the remarkable initiatives as transforming mentalities in another continent and teens' life in Armenia. Over to you.
Thank you, DJ, for your great and comprehensive talk, giving us the more global perspective and the role of education. I'm just checking with my colleague Sylvia if there are any questions in the Q&A.
Yes, there is a question in the
Great.
Q&A.
Go ahead.
I'm sure that the colleagues following speakers will answer this, because the question is, are there any sources or materials that provide guidance on approaches to prevent toxic masculinity, particularly with applications or examples from different countries? And that is what we will talk about in the rest of the webinar. So
perfect. Okay, so stay tuned to this webinar to hear all this. Thank you. Okay. Other than that, I think we can move to what DJ already talked about, this very interesting initiative from Armenia. So I would like now to introduce to you Armi, who is going to tell us about the Positive Masculinity Project. And Armi, well, basically we're interested in how was the project idea emerged and developed. What was the goal of the project? What have you done to achieve it? And can you share results? And you will have actually most time of all the speakers, because we really are keen to hear your experience from the ground. Please go ahead, Armi.
Thank you very much. And hi, everyone, again. Yeah, so just to start, and I'll share my screen as well. But okay, so about the idea, how it emerged. So ever since Teens Life has been around, which was 2018, 2019, one of our main and priority themes has been gender equality and just addressing gender stereotypes, as well as gender-based violence. So throughout these 6-7 years, we've been very active in finding different ways to approach this kind of advocacy and fight against gender-based violence. And last year, we had this great opportunity to partner with UNAIDS and, of course, with UNESCO to work on a new approach toward combating and lowering gender-based violence in Armenia, which is to approach it from providing young men, especially, with an alternative that is positive masculinity. I'll talk a little more about how it is very context-specific to Armenia. But just before that, just to give you how the project was implemented, I'll start from the very beginning. So this is the basic outline, and I'll talk a little about the focus groups and then the masculinity test itself, what recommendations we came down to with our experts, and the social media campaign, as well as the educational model. So to start with the goals, of course, we had 3 main goals in mind. That is redefining masculinity in Armenia, promoting emotional well-being, and challenging harmful stereotypes. And all of this, in the end, in the long term, to contribute to the fight against gender-based violence. So to shortly talk about the focus group that we implemented, we based our digital tests on the International Masculinity Test from 2022. This is UNFPA. And to adapt and to localize the test, we implemented 2 focus groups. So Yerevan is the capital city of Armenia, which has the highest population. That's why we had 11 young men joining from Yerevan, and then 13 young men joining from different regions of Armenia, almost all regions. This really just helped to first of all, have diverse opinions on the topic, but as well as to have people who are from different parts of Armenia to talk about this issue, including a lot of young men were from, for example, rural areas as well. So based on the focus groups, we had a lot of recommendations from our experts, which you can find in the full report. But we took these recommendations and we developed a digital masculinity test. So we shared this test and distributed it on social media, of course, targeting young men from 16 to 25 years old. This was our target audience. And 1,946 individuals completed the test, from which only 50 responses were not were incomplete. That's why, so essentially it was about 1,900 young men from all over Armenia completing this test. And of course, we had different perceptions of masculinity because, first of all, we wanted to really try to find out what people and young men especially think about masculinity in Armenia, because unfortunately, we don't have any comprehensive data or continuous statistics on this. So that was a key for us. And of course, a lot of young men identified patriotism or financial stability, as well as respect or adherence to traditional gender roles as part of being masculine. But then a small minority of men who took the test thought of aggression or sense of superiority over women as also masculinity, which is exactly what we really try to combat through this project as well, to work with these harmful stereotypes and to promote the positive ones, the healthy ones. So we were pretty excited by, for example, this question that a lot of respondents thought that masculinity is never about, for example, beating their wife or being indifferent, selfish, never accepting alternative opinions or forcing their opinion. This was also a very important finding for us. Instead, these men thought that those who took the test thought that being physically and psychologically strong was very important as part of their masculine identity, being educated, cultured, and developed, as well as caring about everyone around. And again, we have patriotic, of course, given the context that we are working with, which is Armenia. Yeah, patriotism is a very important trait from childhood for men. So the respondents identified different things that they thought were these negative factors contributing to their development of masculinity. For example, the first one is harmful environment, that is the peer circle, and then bullying, negative behavior, relationships at school, wrong perceptions about masculinity as well, and we have family too. As a contrast, as a positive sense, masculinity, the respondents thought was positively expressed in family, but towards, for example, their wife or children and parents, and serving the fatherland, again, right, the trait of patriotism here too, in different types of communication, in the workplace, toward nature, etc. This part was especially important for us because Teens Live is a digital media and we work with youth and teenagers. So we were surprised, but in a sad way, that although we, from our observations as well, have really observed that masculinity is portrayed in a negative way, and a lot of harmful stereotypes are being reproduced by both traditional media and on social media as well. So the respondents also thought that masculinity was portrayed negatively or unrealistically, and that's why they did not want to follow these examples. So this was really important for us to take into consideration as our current year and also the rest of the last year's content plan was developed. So we too tried to share as many positive masculine role models and examples as we could. And we also encourage our colleagues from different other media platforms to do the same. domestic violence as part of gender-based violence was important for us to really understand what these young men thought about if domestic violence was part of masculinity or not. And gladly, they firmly rejected domestic violence as part of it. Instead, they thought that care and also power together, which of course there is a big contradiction, but they put these two together as part of their masculine identities. So with our psychologist, who is also specializing in gender-sensitive psychology, we've drawn a few practical recommendations. You can again find the full list in the report that we will link, I'm sure, at the end. So of course, we would recommend first to amplify our message through education and awareness, to just continue talking about gender equality to different target groups of young men. That includes from 16 years old to 25 and older. Just talk about gender-based violence, talk about bullying, and how these are not part of quote unquote true or acceptable masculine image, and to instead encourage men to form healthy relationships, because that is really part of the healthy masculine and positive masculine approach. Then, of course, positive stories, which, as I mentioned, we did during the project, and I'll talk about it more later, but just try to provide role models and real life examples of how men can show their positive masculine attitudes and behavior in real life, because that really helps to kind of take from theory and bring in practice. And this especially applied to Armenia, because a lot of content in the Armenian language is not really widespread on positive masculinity, which may be the case, for example, for English or other more international languages. We also recommend doing and implementing more online and, if it is possible, with resources, also offline events with men, because as much as we continue, and it's a big part of our job to empower women and girls, but at the same time, with a lot, if there's enough resources, it is very important to also invest in men's education, and really just to try to hear them and also address their needs to kind of prevent this development of harmful stereotypes among men. We are also, of course, happy to both share the results and to try to contribute as much to the discussions of relevant draft laws and mechanisms that can help to prevent gender-based violence. Although we do have some legislations in Armenia, but there's always place to develop it and to both help the survivors of gender-based violence and also to just contribute to the prevention of it. And of course, lastly, periodically monitor the change. This is very important because the public perception of masculinity constantly changes. And we as well, after implementing this Positive Masculinity Project, are also planning in the near future to really just go back and check as much as we can with people who either responded to test or just with our audiences on social media, if their perceptions of masculinity have changed more or no, but hopefully they have. So now a more fun part, which is the social media campaign. So we've during this project, we've launched a social media campaign called Create New Story. We, with our team and our designer, developed this character who was called Jourdan. You can see him in the left comics. So, of course, harmful stereotypes as well as toxic masculinity differs from country to country, but in Armenia specifically, there's this one image of how young men should look like and how they should conform to different societal harmful expectations. So we thought we could take this character and show how this person can actually change if they want to. We did that through, for example, this series of comics that is available on our social media, where Jourdan is actually showing how men can stand up against violence, how they can show different emotions, how they can be more caring instead of controlling, and so on. So this was just very both exciting and appealing to young men. And it was more engaging because on social media, that was the tricky part. We were trying to keep it as balanced as possible and give as much information, solid information as possible, but also to keep it engaging so that young men would continue with the educational model. Yeah, so our campaign was informative articles, again, delivered in a fun way, but also with different colors and visuals to help to keep the attention span. And we had these comics, and we've collaborated with, I think I have it here. Yes, we've collaborated with 5 to 6 influencers in Armenia. We chose specifically those also male influencers who we thought would deliver our message the best way possible, because these men are also advocating for really healthy relationships among young men, and they also have wide audiences, mostly consisting of men. So we've collaborated with them. We've published collaborative reels on social media, as well as they have promoted the digital masculinity test. And as a kind of total result of the campaign, social media, we've had more than 800,000 views and impressions on social media, which was also something we're very proud of. And we're happy that the message got through. And just shortly about the educational model. So, and the Telegram bot that we've created. So the logic of the campaign was to first engage young men to take the masculinity test, so that we could learn more about what they themselves think about masculinity, what they consider toxic or what they consider positive. And then based on the test, we've developed this educational model with our psychologists that that is 6 articles and 6 podcasts. So we have both types of media, both audio and readable. And so, yeah, so after completing the test, this man would get a link to our Telegram bot that is an interactive way to engage with educational content. And then they would be able to pass this 6 podcasts and read optionally already the 6 articles that are on different topics. For example, starting with the very basics, right? What is masculinity? Why is men's mental health important? Why they should be able to access mental health support if they need it. Our psychologists also talked about gender-based violence, how it's never okay or never excusable, the importance of gender equality, changing gender norms, and of course, we finished the educational model with talking about healthy relationships, their importance, and just giving also maybe some practical tips on how to understand if your relationship is healthy or how to make it more healthy as a young man. So you can access the bot right now as well. It is in Armenian language, but you can access it scanning the QR. So after developing the educational model, we were trying to find ways how to make this module appealing to young men, because just publishing on a website or only on social media would not have been enough of motivation for them to, read or to listen to educational content. So we came up with the Telegram bot. It allows to, first of all, make it interactive, right? After this man join the Telegram bot, they can listen to the podcast, and then the bot kind of talks to them, as in sends short polls, And then if you answer all the polls correctly, and if you listen to all of the education module, which is not very long, actually. I mean, it is 6 to 6, but I mean, 6 podcasts and 6 articles, but it is not long in itself. So after they've completed the whole module, we've also given them certificates, because we thought it would be a good, positive reinforcement for them to just continue with this message and to try to be more positive masculine in their lives. Yeah, so just as a description of the project, and yeah, if there's any questions or any specific things you'd like me to talk more about, I'll be happy to.
Thank you so much, Army, for your very comprehensive and great introduction to your really fascinating and interesting project on young men in particular, and your use of innovative ways to reach. And actually, there's a question in the chat from Zelia, our colleague from Portugal, who asked, do you consider the possibility of promoting also meetings with boys and girls, or men and women, in addition to meeting with just men, as a way to get girls' perception?
Okay, so
it's, yeah, go ahead.
You mean, right, if I got it correctly, then essentially having both men and women talk
yeah, together.
about these gender issues.
Yeah,
right,
yeah, the
right.
two gender, yes.
For sure,
What's your take on that?
Yeah. So from our experience, our all of our offline and online events, including those on gender equality and gender stereotypes, violence, are kind of inclusive to everyone. So we do facilitate discourse and discussion among different genders, because of course that's certainly very important. However, because during the both focus group discussions and based on the test results, a lot of young men, when they want to transform to a more healthy perception of masculinity, sometimes they do need a more individualized or discussion groups, when it's sometimes only young men who can talk about their issues specifically. But I absolutely agree that having platforms where everyone can come together and discuss these issues is really important.
You have a final comment to make, Army, before we move to the next speaker?
We would be very excited to share. Our team would be very excited to share more insights if anyone is interested. Yeah, so to share very specifically if there are any questions.
Great. Okay, we'll see if we have to squeeze some time. We have a very dense webinar as usual, but thanks a lot, Army, and
thank you.
I would like now to invite our colleagues Yelena and Katrina to tell us about why UNAIDS and UNESCO, the two UN organizations here, have supported this project, and what UNAIDS and UNESCO stand on are on gender equality and prevention of gender-based violence. So Yelena, would you like to
I'll start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, I also would like to thank Army very much for a great presentation. We also learned a lot from this project. I would like to mention that, of course, it would not be possible without technical expertise of UNESCO, who have been our really great partner for a long time in this region. And we invited them especially because they're experts in, working with digital resources and with organizations like Teens Life. And of course, the government of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, who provided the financial support. Well, we at UNAIDS believe that we cannot solve, we cannot end the HIV/AIDS epidemic without addressing the inequalities, including the gender inequality. And gender-based violence creates significant harm to women and girls, and also increases their risk of HIV and decreases their ability to be treated. We know that women who face gender-based violence, they sometimes stop receiving ART, antiretroviral treatment. And some of our research, recent gender assessment, for example, that UNAIDS supported in Armenia, they showed that unfortunately gender-based violence is still widespread in Armenia and persist both in offline and online spaces and deeply rooted in Armenians' social norms. And we already my colleagues already talked about the importance of, social norm change. I'd like to maybe mention another few studies that we have on violence. One of them was completed by a local Armenian organization. It's called Real World, Real People, with support from European Union, and they looked particularly at marginalized women who actually faced higher levels of violence. They asked women who live with HIV or who are women who use drugs, and they found out that 70% of them, they experienced parental abuse as children. And in the last 12 months, at the time of the study, about 80% of them experienced one form of violence from the spouse or partner. It was not necessarily sexual violence, but it could be economical violence or psychological one. We also consider at UNAIDS that there is institutional violence or obstetric, as it's called. One of the examples is when, for example, women living with HIV are forced to have an abortion, or when abortion is related to the choice of the gender of the embryo for cultural reasons or religious reasons, for example. Unfortunately, many of women, they do not seek help. In many of our countries, especially in Central Asia, we know that women tolerate violence. About 40% of both men and women overall believe that it's okay if a man beats his wife, and in many countries it's still unfortunately perceived as a kind of private matter which should not be shared outside of the house. And this is specifically what we were trying, to fight with supporting this project by changing the very kind of core, the social norms. And it was also really interesting for us to find out through Teens Live that the biggest trust that boys and young men have is within their close circles, within families, within friends, and not so much even the media. So hopefully we will continue to support such project. That was a pilot for us in Armenia. I know that there is interest in some other countries, and hopefully I do have some preliminary news that we might have also funding to continue these efforts in Armenia. And I'm happy to announce it here today at the webinar. And because I know there was a great interest to the test, and even it was at some point it was even closed because there was not enough resources to process the data, which showed extreme interest. But let me stop here and give a opportunity to Katya also to share from UNESCO side. Thank you.
Yeah, dear Lena, thank you so much. Indeed, we appreciate greatly your support and the support of the Dutch of Luxembourg that made possible to implement this very important project. And I'm extremely pleased to join this discussion today, since we are discussing the topic that goes beyond any policies and frameworks, because today we are deliberating on deeply personal challenges that impact families, communities, and the broader progress toward equality, I would say. So indeed, UNESCO and UNAIDS have long partnered to challenge harmful gender norms and stereotypes and promote inclusivity. So as Professor Jourdan mentioned today, by focusing on men and boys as allies, we advance gender equality, and our initiatives aim to address the root causes of inequality and violence in general. So one such initiative is the Joint Positive Masculinity Project, which was excellently presented today by my colleague Armi. Indeed, it featured a dynamic social media campaign that was a great success, and the campaign served as a platform for dialogue on societal expectations of masculinity. And here I would say that we gathered the views, the insights from both men and women, girls and boys. And of course, as we already mentioned, it was designed based on insights from focus groups conducted across Armenia. This approach not only ensured the campaign's relevance, but also allowed us to collect valuable sociological data. So this evidence-based strategy was instrumental in creating targeted and impactful messages that resonated deeply with our audience, with our youth that we try to empower through these campaigns. But today I would also like to share some global perspectives, some global initiatives that make this path towards equality be a success, let's say. So globally, we have implemented several transformative activities, and I've heard there were questions about other regional deliveries. So here we go. First of all, we have trained civil society organizations in Central Asia, and we engaged men in combating gender-based violence, equipping them with the skills to facilitate long-term change. Then we also had capacity building workshops in East Africa that have focused on fostering positive masculinities and engaging boys in schools to create more inclusive learning environments. And as Professor Jourdan mentioned today, there was also a very important initiative, the Transforming Mentalities program. It introduced a training session for social workers and psychologists to better engage men and address domestic violence in Central Asia. And it was also accompanied by the development of practical manual for community organizations. So it was really a very comprehensive tool that helped society to combat these gender-based violence related issues, let's say. So in a nutshell, I would say that all our global initiatives share some common characteristics. First of all, I would highlight that programs are most effective when they are co-designed with their communities they serve, with the people in the field. I mean, both the communities and the program officers working in the field. For example, the Positive Masculinity campaign in Armenia gained traction because we reflected the insights and voices of the youth and communities consulted during its implementation and development. Then I would say another important point is using creative approaches like digital service, interactive campaigns, like storytelling, all these things we all know about, but they are not always used. And I would say using them make complex topics more accessible and more relatable. So these tools do engage audiences effectively, and they also foster meaningful discussions and thus changes. Then I would say that sustainable initiatives like our training programs in Central Asia, like the Transforming Mentalities program, they have demonstrated that the importance of empowering local organizations will help us sustain and also scale the work that they can continue independently. And of course, I need to show this link to the Sustainable Development Goals, because our efforts, they were firmly rooted in the SDGs. First of all, the SDG 5 on gender equality, but also SDG 4 on inclusive and equitable education. And I would say that like for UNESCO and for the UN in general, education is not only a fundamental, is considered to be not only a fundamental right, but also a catalyst for changing attitudes and behaviors. So I would say that at UNESCO, we are committing to building on these successes, and our approaches mainly focuses on three interconnected pillars. First of all, we will be talking about access. So we try to ensure that all individuals have equitable opportunities to learn and grow. Then the second pillar is content. So we develop inclusive educational materials that challenge stereotypes, but also support emotional well-being. And the other truly important pillar is engagement, as I have already mentioned. So we try to leverage technology, but also partnerships, like the fruitful partnership with our UNAIDS colleagues. So we try by leveraging these tools, we try to expand the reach and impact of our initiatives. So for instance, through the Transforming Mentalities program, we've seen how engaging men and boys via structured training and dialogue can shift long-standing social norms. And by focusing on these capacity building initiatives, we ensure that these changes, they are not only meaningful, but also sustainable. As a conclusion, I would just say that promoting positive masculinity and also combating gender-based violence are essential steps while moving towards achieving gender equality. And I think that it's only possible when we marry global priorities with local action, with local changes. So thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to continuing this dialogue. And I was really pleased to hear that we'll have this financial support to continue our initiative in Armenia, and not only will expand the geography and will do the good things for more communities, like both in our region and across the globe. Thank you so much.
I think we continue with our the final speaker, the second contribution from Maria, to give some examples, because some of the questions were about that. Some other projects that or studies that aim to end and support the promotion of gender equality by addressing harmful social norms and behavioral patterns. So Maria, I give you back the floor to you. And then if we have time, I would also like to invite all the speakers for maybe some closing comments. So please go ahead, Maria.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who stayed online. I'm really hoping that what we're doing here is engaging in a conversation with you about how you may be thinking yourselves about developing or evaluating interventions that you have in place to encourage positive masculinities and gender equality in relation to sexual and reproductive health and rights. And one of you has asked about resources. And I'm very happy to share the PowerPoint slides I have here today with the references to the evaluations of the work that we've done in this area. And our colleagues at UNESCO will share those out with you. And but let me tell you a little bit more about them now. And I suppose I want to start with some 3 take-home messages for those of you who are interested in developing interventions to transform masculinities and sexual and reproductive health and rights, just as has been done in Armenia. And I think 3 key takeaway home messages that I would like to impart in terms of what I think works well is, first of all, co-designing with boys and men, indeed co-designing with youth in general. And this is particularly important because boys and men know that a lot is said about them. They hear about toxic masculinities. They know sometimes that sexual and reproductive health and rights doesn't sit easily for them. It's something to do with girls. So it's really important in any work that we do here to hear about boys and men's own stories in this, to hear about their own hopes, if you like, for positive, intimate sexual relationships, and to know that they're listened to. So co-designed to engage with boys, to hear their stories, to tell their perspectives, to tune into their wavelengths is crucial. And the second C that I'd like to talk about really is about conveying their perspectives and the importance of this. So for us in our interventions, we tend to use drama, short films that are scripted with young boys and men, and for whom we take advice from and how we cast the actors and so on. But as Army has shown, this is also just as well done through comic strips. Or, also Army's example showed about the ways in which their stories were conveyed then by wider social influencers through the social media campaign. So it's critically important that these stories are sort of conveyed from boys' perspectives on these issues. So that even actually when programs are being delivered in schools like ours are, or in prisons like ours are, and when they're coming from kind of adult perspectives or being facilitated by adults, that the youth voice and the boys' voices are not lost in these programs. And the third C is about challenging boys and men. And that's where Elena started in her talk today as well. She reminded us again about the ways in which boys and men's actions in today's world, it's true, have very serious repercussions for the ways in which girls and women live, their rights to sexual and reproductive health and rights, whether it's, in terms of very serious violations like sexual violence or gender-based violence, or things that we consider less serious, like, for example, sharing caring work, whether it's household work or caring work for children or elderly parents. It's about challenging men in the ways in which this impacts on women's lives. So these three C's, I think, are saying to us that, yes, we need in every intervention to say, yes, come to the table, join in with us, let's hear your voices. But now we're also going to challenge you to think with us about men's behaviours and attitudes which negatively impact sexual and reproductive health and rights. And in the programs we talk about today, commonly we think about doing this with young boys in groups or individuals. But as Didier sort of started off this morning saying, or a little while ago, he said, think about the blocks. Think about the multi-level approaches that we need in order to create change. So it's also thinking about the ways we engage men in thinking about the way health services are structured, access to health services, access to education services, who we elect, how we set up our services, including actually as well, access to abortion services. And this challenging piece is about how we do gender transformative work with men and boys. So now I'm going to give you a few examples of how we've applied this in our interventions. So the first program I'm going to tell you about is called If I Were Jack. And this is a comprehensive sexuality education program. And it's designed for use in schools in the UK and Ireland, with boys and girls, to speak to that question, aged approximately 14 years of age. But it's designed specifically to engage with boys, because we know that sometimes sex education in schools is gender blind. We assume that boys will engage as much as girls, but actually they don't. And often they don't if they're not expressly brought into the conversation. Now, If I Were Jack isn't the answer to all issues. It specifically looks at unintended pregnancy, in fact. But it does speak to this broader role of promoting positive, consensual, intimate relationships with all sexes and all sexual identities. And I suppose we've been working on this for a while, so we've had now the opportunity to also bring this through to a full randomized controlled trial with over 8,000 pupils in the UK and Ireland. And we've had some very positive results from this trial. And crucially, it's been the first trial of a comprehensive sexuality education program that proved that we could increase safe sex with boys as well as girls. or contraceptive use once boys and girls are sexually active. But it's also had shown positive effects in relation to improving gender equality relationships and intentions to have safe consensual sex, and also in terms of access to just knowledge about sexual health services. So all of those things were proven to be improved in the JAC trial. So I suppose what the JAC trial in essence showed us that if you engage with boys, they will lean in. And so that encouraged us to also go on to design interventions in South Africa and Lesotho, where the need is arguably larger. But again, to go back to this co-design part, we started from scratch almost again, looked at the scripts that we were using in our interactive dramas. I could, pause by saying that I told you that these interventions are drama-based. And so in each of these versions, the UK version, the South Africa Lesotho version, and the Uruguay version that we have on the screen here, we co-designed a script with young boys about what it was like to be told your girlfriend is unintentionally pregnant. And the film is an interactive film that tells the story of a week in the life of a young man whose girlfriend is unintentionally pregnant and how he thinks through these issues. It is interactive in the sense that it stops every couple of moments, and we invite young boys and girls to think about, what would you do if I were Jack? What would you say to your girlfriend? How would your friends react? What would you tell your parents? How would they react? Would you access health services? If so, what would that be like? So we're trying to develop almost stop and think strategies or communication strategies with young boys around these issues, and also helping them think about how they might access support. So when we went on to do a version in South Africa and Lesotho, we didn't simply take the script from UK and Ireland, but stopped again and asked young boys and girls, what's it like in South Africa in this situation? What's real for you? So you could hear it from their voices. And again, the same in Uruguay. So in each of these cases as well, these programs are followed up with classroom-based exercises. And in these classroom-based exercises, we tease out these issues further about, well, how do you access knowledge? What do you know? What do you need to know? Where do you find that information? And not just giving the information, but teaching young people the skills of where to get that information. And that was clear in Army's intervention as well. It wasn't didactic education, it was interactive. We also do classroom activities to challenge stereotypes, challenge harmful masculinities. And we do this with boys and girls talking to each other, because sometimes it's that conversation between boys and girls that's really important. And but crucially also, we, as part of this intervention, we reach out to parents. And we have classroom activities that go home with the pupils. Sometimes they don't reach the home through the pupils. We recognize this. So the schools also send out text messages with specific videos for the parents. So it begins a kind of what Didier was talking about with some more of the blocks in the wall. But I thought Army's example of having social influencers around the intervention would also enhance this intervention very much. So each time you can learn things from different interventions. This is very much a classroom-based one. So that's the If I Were Jack one. We'll share the references with you. We'll share indeed the materials with you if you're interested in developing interventions like this. And now I just want to share one more example with you before I finish up. This is one called If I Were Dad, and this is the first comprehensive sexuality education program that was developed by young men in custody or in prisons for young men in prisons. And at the start of our seminar as well today, the chair mentioned the importance of lifelong education. And that is particularly important for young men in prison, who usually have left school at a very young age and have definitely lost out the opportunities for that sort of communication with parents and with peers at a young age. So on foot of the If I Were Jack work, we were invited into prisons to do a kind of a relationship and sexuality education program with slightly older men, 16 to 24. And lo and behold, of course, we found out that If I Were Jack didn't work. Wrong target audience, too young, and also they felt that Jack was too foolish. They'd be much more streetwise. They knew what to do. But crucially also, they thought that they wanted to be dads. So wanting to be a dad was the hook that brought them into wanting to know about good relationships, preventing gender-based violence. And that's the message, I suppose, when you co-design with young people. You need to find out what is the hook that's going to bring them in to the conversation. What's going to be the motivation for them to change their lives? And this program followed the kind of themes that Army put up. It talked about, what's it like to be a man? What's it like to be a good man? What's it like to have a good relationship? What does that look like? What does caring for a child in the future look like? And what is good? Well, how do you prevent gender-based violence in your life, for starters? And how do you challenge it in society? So I should stop there. But again, here's a reference to the evaluation of that study that we wrote up about the If I Were Dad project. You're welcome to access it. You'll hear about the rights-based design behind it. And then I'll also leave you with some further references to work that I've mentioned today. The BMJ editorial there gives you a summary of work we've done with WHO in general on challenging harmful masculinities. What are the priorities to look at in relation to men, boys, masculinities, and sexual and reproductive health and rights? The SHRM blog there gives you a nice lay summary of some of the results of the Jack trial and so on. So thank you very much. Look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria, for your great introduction to the different initiatives and the 3 C's. That is a great, I think, learning, the co-designing, the conveying the message, and the challenging the masculinity parts. Really great. It may be good to have every speaker spotlighted, Sylvia, just to for the closing. We have another few minutes left before we actually will close this webinar. And there was one question that was basically addressed to all of you here about the link between positive masculinity being related to personal feelings of self-respect and purpose among men that come from having good life opportunities, for example, in terms of having a meaningful job. And this points to system-related economic improvement as one of the broader measures needed to fundamentally reduce gender-based violence. What's your take on that? Army, would you maybe reflect on that? I mean, looking at the broader context and your particular initiative.
Sorry, if I could ask you to repeat the question. I was trying to get the link for that.
Well, just basically the link, between being, masculine, the masculinity part, and the relationship between economic improvement as a broader measure to fundamentally change, and impact gender-based violence. It's very much focused on the individual behavior, but what's the broader context?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like being positive masculine and just forming healthy relationships is not only an individual choice, but also it greatly affects our communities wherever we are. So I believe that if we do contribute and do spread positive masculine attitudes about this, about relationships, and if everyone has a more healthy approach, then that is definitely going to translate into our materialistic lives as well. Yeah, that's just top of my mind.
Great, thank you. And Katrina and Elena, from your side, from the UN perspective.
Thank you. I think with this project, we contribute to reaching SDG 5 on gender equality, to respect, inclusivity, diversity, safety, because, you know, when we talk about violence, sometimes men could also be victims of violence. And I was reading a little bit through the comments. To those, I wanted to answer, we do not exclude, you know, young women or women by these projects, but we're trying to tackle the very actors of violence. Unfortunately, more often are men, but they also could be victims, as I mentioned. And we do know that programs are actually more effective if we engage women. And maybe in the next phase of this project in Armenia, we'll consider, and we ask women what they think, and we engage them also. But yeah, let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Katrina, from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you so much, Hof. Actually, I do see this linkage between the broad economic perspectives and having great opportunities that related to men are reflecting more positive masculinity patterns. Frankly, I'm not sure I saw that clear linkage between I'm sorry, I will just cite it. That girls tend to do better than boys at school. Do we need to give better support for the general learning attainment of boys? I think it's pretty questionable to me, and I think we should really go case by case when tackling this issue. But generally, I think the answers are all about creating inclusive learning environments that make flourish both boys and girls at school, but also having some individual programs that may be different for boys and girls, but maybe not based on gender, but mainly on some special characteristics of some concrete girls or concrete boys. Well, I hope I didn't bring chaos while answering to it, because
No.
it finds that this question was really comprehensive. It did some reflection on that, and I'm not sure we can broadly respond today to some questions that are connected to system-related economic improvement, but definitely the better economic conditions we have, the better education we have, the closer we are to gender equality, which includes positive masculinity in it, I would say like that.
Thank you, Katrina. And DJ, would you like to have a reflection?
Thanks to all of you for that great talks. I must say that I learned a lot. Just to say one thing, I'm really on the same page as you. You know, violence has no gender. And we cannot consider that educating men, you know, mean educating the horrible beasts that are responsible for all the violence. What we are talking about is social pressure. It's about acting on the norms just to try to support boys and young men in their emancipation from the social pressure they face, including the economic pressure. So yes, it's more about supporting young boys in their emancipation from the social pressure. Over to you.
Maria?
No, I thank you very much.
Okay. So there's one final question in the chat, just to maybe briefly look at a question from Lebo Molai, wondering whether the LGBTIA plus group is involved in the project. Army, can you say something about that, or Maria?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we are very inclusive to everyone. The issue is with stigma and broader discrimination in Armenia as well. But yeah, throughout our projects, we are, of course, inclusive to everyone and trying to hear everyone's diverse perspectives. So,
yeah, great. Thank you, Maria.
Yes, equally, though sometimes it's harder to do in some projects than others. We found, for example, that men in prison were quite loath to come out as anything other than heterosexual. So thank you very much, though.
Yeah. And as you said, Maria, in your presentation, what is the hook to bring man into the conversation? Having the conversation, having a positive focus, you know, and a way forward is basically what you're all saying and presenting. I want to thank you all very much for your contribution, and I want to encourage everyone to stay, you know, involved in this engagement, your engagement in promoting gender equality. And we will provide all the different presentations and resources and articles that were mentioned on the webpage of the UNESCO chair, which is in the chat, and probably repeated, but you will receive that anyway. I want to thank our colleagues from the Institute IITE for organizing this webinar, you know, bringing the excellent speakers together, and in the cooperation with UNESCO Chair in Global Health and Education. Thank you for your attention. Have a good continuation of the day, and we hope to see you in our next webinar or in any other opportunity where we can meet. Have a good day. Bye-bye.